me, your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where your man, Louie Tee, aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series. We could not tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in X said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer out there, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Pack next, Green Bay next, next, GB, next, go Pack, go. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Cheeseheads themselves, the Green Bay Packers. Go Pack, go. Go Pack, go. And this has been somewhat odd for the Green Bay Packers. Last season was rough, and generally, when Aaron Rodgers plays essentially a full season, despite having the injury that he sustained in week 1 versus the Bears and probably wasn't right the remainder of the season, he played in just about every game, did leave week 17's contest, ass-whooping rather, versus the Detroit Lions with the concussion, but that's nor here nor there. We're used to the Packers making the postseason and overcoming whatever adversity comes their way with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. This was a tumultuous season in which they saw their head coach be fired mid-season, and the wheels essentially come off of the Green Bay Packers train. There was a report and a story in the offseason kind of chronicling how all the things kind of fell apart in Green Bay, and it was a mess. Something we're not accustomed to seeing from the Packers, one of the classy organizations and probably model organizations in all of football. They generally win when they're healthy, especially when Aaron Rodgers is good to go. And that just wasn't the case last year. And so a lot of change in Green Bay. Last year, they got themselves a new general manager and Brian Gutekunst instead. And so he had a draft last year that I thought was more along the lines of, I'm putting my stamp on this organization. And it was 11 players. It was more quantity over quality. This draft seems like it's going to be a little bit more quality and substance driven. And I think this is a phenomenal draft. Unlike last year's draft, where I wasn't really that moved by the draft. Like I said, a lot of substance this year, not so much last year. And so year 2 seems like it's going to be in a much better place for this Packers organization. Obviously, they get a head coach that they believe in Matt LaFleur, who's going to come in and hopefully take Aaron Rodgers, if this is even possible, to the next level. And so they're hoping that the future is much brighter than some of the past couple of years in Green Bay under Mike McCarthy. That being said, you look at this Packers football team, you got 12, you got a shot, you add some talent on the defensive side of the football. And Brian G said, look, we're going to spend more money in free agency this year. That's not something the Packers have done in the past. They've been a team, much like Minnesota, built through the draft, sign and retain our own, and that's how we're going to do things in Green Bay. And they've done that for much of the time over the last 2 decades. That's what they've done. Okay. But this past offseason, they spent some bread. Okay. They gave up the Skrilla to some players to bring in to try to turn this thing around because, again, we're not accustomed to the Packers losing games with Aaron Rodgers in the lineup, which they did quite often a season ago. And so, they went out and they spent money on edge rushers. They're starting to cleanse this roster of veterans that are past their prime. No more Nick Perry on this roster. No more Clay Matthews on this roster. Out with the old, in with the new. You bring in Preston Smith. You bring in Zadarius Smith. You're looking to upgrade the defensive talent on this football team. You've spent a ton of capital on guys in the secondary. And last year's draft alone, you spent 2 picks, two of your top picks on corners. The year previous to that, you were looking for secondary help as well. So this is a team, you spent some free agent dollars prying away the Bears safety Adrian Amos in free agency at the safety position. They spent free agent money on the defensive side of the football, did the Green Bay Packers, looking to elevate what has been a sore spot for them over the years on their defensive unit. And so now they're looking to get after the quarterback. They're looking to marry that with a secondary that's young and talented. And so now you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. On that side of the football, you feel like Aaron Rodgers is going to give you a chance on the offensive side of the football. They could use some weaponry upgrades on that side as well. They did all of those things and more in this draft. And so let's see what Brian G. and company got accomplished in the 2019 NFL draft. Let's look at what they were able to do. And we start in the first round. 12th overall selection, linebacker out of Michigan, Rashan Gary is the selection to get this Packers draft underway. So I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sugarcoat. This was not a pick that I was very fond of. In the moment, I wasn't very happy with the pick for the Packers. And I'm still not on board. Now, I don't know exactly how they're going to utilize him. I'm listening to some of the people, area scouts and things of that nature for the Packers talk about this selection and what it means and how they're going to utilize him. And look, I love Mike Pettin. And I talked about the overhaul in Green Bay, new coaching staff. You know, Dom Capers has been a source of frustration for many Packers fans for years. I've listened to Packer fan after Packer fan after Packer fan tell me Dom Capers has to go. And so that was a change that was on the horizon. Whether I think Mike McCarthy came back or not, if Mike McCarthy came back, I still think Dom Capers was going to be out. I think he was going to be one of those guys that was going to be a sacrificial lamb this coming off season. But you bring in Mike Pettin, who I absolutely love as a defensive mind in this league, and I think he's going to do wonders for this defense. And so you go out and get all those guys, as I mentioned, Adrian Amos, Za'Darius Smith, Preston Smith in free agency, and you look at this team and the way they're constructed, and I'm not sure what they're going to do with Rashan Gary. I told you I wasn't overly impressed with him, but the guy's talented. Let's not act as if the guy doesn't have talent. He said he was misused at Michigan. We'll see, okay? Because Mike Pettin is going to figure out what this guy does best, and he's going to put him in positions to succeed. That's what Mike Pettin has done throughout his career as a defensive coordinator. Hell, even as a head coach, wasn't a great head coach, still had a good defense. So I expect Mike Pettin to give the Packers a really good chance on the defensive side of the football. And a guy like Rashan Gary may be able to flourish in his system. They said they're going to start him off at outside linebacker. Well, you can never have enough pass rushers. And they went out and got two pass rushers, as I said, both Za'Darius and Preston Smith in free agency. You're going to add Rashan Gary to that mix. We'll see what happens because you had no pass rush essentially last year. So you're looking for guys to come in and get to the quarterback. And so it's an overhaul at that position. Rashan Gary is going to be a part of that overhaul. At 6'4", 277, he's got some flexibility and some versatility. I think on some even front downs because I think the Packers are going to still be in a 3-4 defense. That's what Mike Pettin has done throughout the course of his year. But, you know, in today's NFL, it's a mixed defense front now. Teams are looking to play multiple fronts. So you may get a 3-4 alignment. You may get a 4-3 over alignment. You may get a ton of nickel. You're going to get nickel because teams are going to come out in 3, 4, 5 wide receiver sets. And so you're going to see multiple fronts. And I think there are going to be situations where you could see Preston, Za'Darius, and Rashan Gary all on the field at the same time looking to get after the quarterback. I would not be shocked if they kicked Rashan Gary inside on specific downs and tried to allow him to get pressure that way. Again, there's so much versatility now with the guys that you have, and I think Rashan Gary is going to add to that. Now, what is his best position going to be? That is a question for the Green Bay Packers organization to answer. Again, they're going to start him out at outside linebacker, but they said they're going to move him around, and I expect them to do exactly that. The guy's a tremendous athlete, especially for his size at almost 280 pounds. This guy ran in the 4.5s at the combine, and he had a 10-second split that was sub 1.6. So you're talking about a guy that's an uber athlete here. So while the tape wasn't all that flattering, there is talent here. I would not have spent the 12th overall pick on Rashan Gary. Let me reiterate that. I said that when the pick was first made. I'm saying that now. I don't think that was the right move at 12. But again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The Packers identified Rashan Gary as a guy that can help them defensively. I can't wait to see how they're going to utilize him. Again, this is going to be one of those selections that will be highly scrutinized if it does not work out in the Packers' favor. So here's to hoping that Rashan Gary fits this defense like hand in glove. We'll see what happens, but I'm not going to break him down. I've already done that on the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Rashan Gary and all the other prospects I was able to get to prior to the 2019 NFL Draft, simply go to the playlist section on the Louie Tee Network and find the 2019 NFL Draft Prospects 101 series. That being said, in the first round, 12th overall selection, edge rusher, linebacker, you call him what you want, out of Michigan, Rashan Gary, for me, is... And you know what's funny about a lot of these picks? They remind me of ex-Packer players. So a lot of these comps that I'm going to give you are going to bring up memories, either fond ones or memories that you'd like to forget of players that have or haven't worked out in Packer past years. And my comp for Rashan Gary is Nick Perry. And so if you like Nick Perry, then you're going to get another guy that can offer you a lot of what Nick Perry offered you. If you weren't a Nick Perry fan, and I was never a huge Nick Perry fan, then you're getting another guy that could be a disappointment. Now, Nick Perry's biggest problem was injuries. And Rashan Gary has had injuries, not to the extent that Nick Perry has had in Green Bay, but he's been a guy that has been banged up, did miss some games last year with some injuries at Michigan. So let's hope that he's not going to have that same fate in Green Bay. And let's hope he's a lot more productive than Nick Perry ever was as a Green Bay Packer. As we move on to your second first round selection, 21st overall, defensive back out of Maryland, Darnell Savage Jr. is the pick. Ooh, yeah. So, as you can see, I went ahead and gave the Rashan Gary pick the linebacker position. We're going to assign him as a linebacker, so we took that off the needs board. Let's quickly go through the needs that I deemed to be important for the Green Bay Packers. I have them listed in the order of importance that I feel like this Packers roster could use going into the 2019 NFL Draft. First thing up, safety. As a matter of fact, with the selection of Darnell Savage Jr., you just got to what I deem to be one of the better safeties in this draft. He was my second rated safety in this draft. And so let's take Darnell Savage. But probably one of my favorite players in this entire draft was Darnell Savage Jr. And you got him here at 21. Some people thought it was a little high for Darnell Savage Jr. I vehemently disagree. I thought this was great. And just look at it this way. And this is what I always try to explain to people when you think that a team reached for a player. Similar to the Oakland Raiders and Clelin Ferrell at 4. If you felt like the Raiders were reaching for him at 4, which is a distinct possibility, guess what? If they would have waited until their next selection in the first round, which was 24, he wasn't going to be there. And so instead of you having to package up picks to come up and get a guy that you really like, how about you just take him in the first place so you don't have to waste draft assets to go up and get him? And so that's the same thing here with the Packers. Look, he wasn't going to be around. And as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Packers traded up. They weren't the 21st pick in the draft. That belonged to the Baltimore Ravens. They came up to get him because if they would have waited, and I think they had the New Orleans pick from last year's trade, allowing the Saints to come up and get Marcus Davenport. Had they waited, and I think the Saints were the 30th pick, if I'm not mistaken, in the draft. If they'd have waited to 30, he wouldn't have been there, and they felt that, and so they came up and got him, and I do not blame them one bit. But anyway, back to the Packers' needs. Safety to me was the biggest need. They've cleansed that position. The Jones kid out of NC State just hasn't worked. and he wants out. And I think the Packers has that feeling being mutual, and I think they're going to part ways at some point. They're not going to give him away because he's a talented kid, but if things don't work out, maybe they do get rid of him. But I'm thinking they're going to look to try to move him at some point, whether it's this year or next offseason. They're going to look to move him, but he's fallen out of favor in Green Bay, whatever the case may be. Remember, this general manager didn't draft him. Now, he was a part of the group that drafted him because Brian G has been in this organization for over 20 years. And that's what the Packers do. They promote from within. But he didn't draft this guy. And maybe he wasn't a huge fan of him to begin with. Either way, the safety position needs an overhaul. No more Morgan Burnett. He was gone last year. And so the safety position needed an upgrade. And you went out and got Adrian Amos. And I think you're adding the perfect counterpart to him here in Darnell Savage Jr. But the safety position needed an upgrade, and you got it here. Tight end, Jimmy Graham. He's a man. He's solid, but he's way past his prime. He's no longer the Jimmy Graham that was dominating in New Orleans. And so I think you need a legitimate threat at the tight end position, the likes of which you haven't seen since Jermichael Finley in his prime in Green Bay. I think you may have gotten that in this draft. And so that's another need that's knocked down. You look at offensive line, I just think you just need more depth along the offensive line, specifically on the interior of the offensive line. And so you took care of that in this draft. I thought there was another player on the board that was a better selection, but we'll get to that when we get there. Obviously, talked about linebacker and how, edge rusher was a big need going into the offseason. You took care of that. So that was the biggest need going into the offseason. You took care of that in free agency. So linebacker also is a need. You allowed Jake Ryan to move on in free agency. Clay Matthews is gone. Nick Perry is gone. Again, some of these guys aren't even contributors in 2018, but they're still gone, and there's still a lack of depth along the linebacker position. You just have Blake Martinez, essentially. Oren Burks is a guy that you drafted last year. Jury's still out on him. I don't want to come to a conclusion on him quite yet, but we'll see what happens at the linebacker position. You're going to add Rashan Gary into that mix, and we'll see what happens. Running back, always a position to me that it goes somewhat undersold in Green Bay. I don't think they necessarily put enough time and energy and even the resources into either developing or selecting running backs in Green Bay. You have a couple of guys on the roster right now in Williams and Jones that are really solid. I love Jones, as a matter of fact. I think he has every opportunity, if the Packers will invest the time and resources into him, to be a star in this league in Aaron Jones. Now, he's got to keep his nose clean off the field, but if he's able to do that and stay healthy, I think this guy has what it takes to be a stud at this level. But I'd like to see them get some diversity in their backfield. They did that in this draft. So, again, knocking down more needs. And then defensive line, again, just more depth. I think you got a bunch of guys on this defensive line that can stop the run. But do you have anybody that can actually rush the quarterback from a defensive line perspective? Not necessarily the case until now. You drafted a guy that can get to the quarterback. So, again, more depth and the Packers knocking down more needs. So, let's get to Darnell Savage Jr., a guy that I absolutely loved him in this draft. Let's talk about him. 5'11", $198, 39.5-inch vert, 4.14 short shuttle, which is stupid in terms of agility and change of direction. And then, of course, just to top it all off, 4.36 40, a guy that can absolutely fly. Now, you see his size, somewhat diminutive. That's what safeties look like in today's NFL now, okay? They look like corners. Gone are the days of the 220-pound safety, unless you're a freak athlete. Here are the days of, safeties looking like corners, glorified nickel corners. And that's what he looks like. But he plays like a safety that can do corner things. And so there isn't one thing that Darnell Savage Jr. can't do at the safety position. The only thing that's stopping this guy from being a surefire top 10 pick is that he's not 6'1", 210. He's instead 5'11", $198. If this guy were 6'1", 210, he'd be a top 7 pick in this draft. That's how good he is. So a versatile defensive back that can do just about anything required of an NFL safety. Can cover over the slot, can drop down in the box as an 8th defender, plays underneath zones very well, as we saw in the Ohio State game. Single high and in a pinch could probably play the cornerback position out wide and do it very admirably, I might add. All right. While his size will be questioned, and I've heard all the whispers and rumblings about this guy's size. I will have none of it because this guy's size to me is really a non-factor if you're asking me. All right. What won't be questioned though is his football IQ, his instincts, speed, athleticism, or toughness. I watched this guy lay a hit on a defender, and I want to say it was against Indiana if I'm not mistaken. Don't get me to lying. But I watched this guy lay a player out on the sideline, and he knocked himself out. Okay? So I won't question the toughness here. This guy comes up with nasty intentions when he comes to make a tackle, despite his size, and he's very instinctual. Again, you saw it in the Ohio State game. His deflection led to directly to a pick six. You've seen him pick off passes and take them to the house. This guy plays the game with a reckless abandon that is so refreshing to watch from the safety position. He can drop over the slot, shut guys down. Like I said, he's got cornerback movements in a safety positional mindset. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers used this guy as a Swiss Army knife and put him everywhere on the field, including corner at times. Remember how when they drafted the Arizona State product a couple of years ago, I can't remember his name. You traded him to the Browns, but he was a safety coming into the NFL and quickly was moved to corner, but he had that ability. I see a lot of that here with Darnell Savage Jr., except that this guy is going to be a hell of a safety in this league, and I love this pick, man. And my comp for him, and I know some people are going to think I'm crazy, go ahead. It doesn't bother me. This guy reminds me a lot of Earl Thomas. I'm serious. He's got a lot of those qualities in him. Earl Thomas has sideline to sideline, red line to red line speed. Earl Thomas will come up and hit you. Earl Thomas can drop over the slot. Earl Thomas can be the eighth defender in the box. Earl Thomas can play underneath zones. Earl Thomas can play single high free safety like nobody's business. All of these things and more you can get out of Darnell Savage Jr. Like I said, ooh yeah, love this pick. In the first round, 21st overall selection, defensive back out of Maryland, Darnell Savage Jr. for me is...
Hits it high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
Who didn't see that coming, right? We go to the second round, 44th overall pick. Offensive lineman out of Mississippi State, Elgton Jenkins is the pick. So Elgton Jenkins is a guy that is very interesting and intriguing to me. If you're using him as a center, and I think the Packers are at first going to start him out at guard, which is fine by me because he's got that kind of versatility. This is a guy that you could argue could play all five positions on the offensive line. He's played left tackle before in college. He's played right tackle before in college. And he's played center. And he's played guard. So theoretically, this guy could play all five positions. And that kind of versatility and positional flexibility is insane. It's rare. And that kind of value probably is what got him drafted here before a guy that I thought, if you're just talking pure centers, he wasn't better than Texas A&M center Eric McCoy. So I thought the Packers got the wrong guy. But then when I heard that the Packers were going to move him to guard, I said, okay, that makes more sense, because if you're talking about playing guard, then Elgton Jenkins projects better to guard than that of Eric McCoy, who is, to me, a pure center prospect. That being said, Elgton Jenkins brings a lot to the table. I like his frame a lot. His length is something that makes that positional flexibility realistic. You know, you hear guys players being talked about as guys that can play multiple positions, but then you look at their measurables and maybe some athletic deficiencies, and you're like, nah, he can't really do that. You know, he's probably better suited to do this and not that. Well, when you look at Elgton Jenkins, I think he could do all five positions because of his size, his length, and his movement skills. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that this guy could easily play tackle if he was coached up to do so. And I know for a fact that he can play guard because I've seen him do it, and I know he's capable. And I know that he can play center because, again, I've seen him do it, and I know he's capable. So there's a lot to like here with Elgton Jenkins here in the second round. 6'4", 310, 34-inch arms. An erect, long-armed offensive lineman with the size and experience to be versatile enough to play anywhere along the offensive line. While center may be his home on Sundays, Jenkins' versatility is something to keep an eye on. Great hand placement, good usage of his length, all bodes well for a guy that isn't the best athlete in the world, and playing in the SEC doesn't hurt either. And what I mean by that is when you play in the SEC, you go up against the best that college football has to offer on the interior of the offensive line. The SEC doesn't usually produce tremendous pass rushers, okay? You're not going to see a ton of great pass rushers come from the SEC. And you get one every now and again. You know, Myles Garrett will come out of there every now and again, and you'll get the occasional third-round sleeper like a Justin Houston out of Georgia. Those happen. You know, Ja'Kai Polite could be a stud at the next level as a third-round pick out of Florida, but for the most part, the studs in the SEC come from the interior defensive line. And so when you're looking at interior defensive line products, you're looking at the offensive linemen that are trying to block these guys. And if you can hold up against the Alabama boys, and they cycle through 3 or 4 of those guys, seems like every year another 2 or 3 guys out of Alabama's interior are getting drafted, and relatively high, I may add. If you can block Quentin Williams for 4 quarters, or at least hold your own, if you can stand up to a lot of these guys that are coming out of the SEC, then you're pretty damn good. You're pretty damn good. And so I saw Elgton Jenkins hold his own against a lot of guys. I thought he struggled in the Alabama game. All right, I'm not going to lie to you. I thought that he got worked versus Alabama, which is another reason why I like Eric McCoy better as a center, because Eric McCoy held his own. And I mean, he held his own, literally did a bang-up job versus Quentin Williams. Quentin Williams had himself a feast versus Elgton Jenkins and Mississippi State. Now, granted, some of that was failure to double team, and he needed some help at times. But some of it was just getting beat by quickness and a guy that's just elite. And so maybe a move to guard isn't the worst thing in the world, but this guy has value at multiple positions. And like I said, anybody not named Quentin Williams didn't have their way with Elgton Jenkins. So I saw a lot of good stuff from him. His length is the thing that I love the most because he uses it so well. I mean, he's got his hands out there and he's locking guys up and he's extending those arms and he's keeping guys at bay. And that's fun to watch. When a guy understands his strength and uses it to maximum capacity, that's saying a lot. And my comp for him, it's Max Unger, the Seattle Seahawk, ex-New Orleans Saint, recently retired New Orleans Saints center that played at a high level for many years in this league. I could see Elgton Jenkins kicking over to guard and being a very solid guard in this league. I could see him moving back to center and being a very effective center. Either way, I think this guy has what it takes to play multiple positions and play them well. And so let's take offensive line off the board as Elgton Jenkins takes care of a big interior offensive line need for me. And also, let's go ahead and give the score for Elgton Jenkins. Second round, 44th pick overall, offensive lineman out of Mississippi State. Elgton Jenkins for me is So we move on to the next pick, third round, 75th pick overall, tight end out of Texas A&M, Jace Sternberger is the selection. So I've already broken down Jace Sternberger prior to the draft in the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Jace Sternberger, that's where you'll need to go. I'll tell you this much. In my breakdown of Jace Sternberger, I told you bluntly that to me, he's got the best hands of any player, irregardless of position in this draft. His hands are exceptional. Probably the fewest drops I saw, and I watched tons of Jace Sternberger tape just to make sure that I wasn't seeing things. And what I found was a guy that was just extremely fluid, great route runner, knows how to get open, really good athlete, and exceptional hands. In tight situations, in traffic, he can catch it. This is a guy that I'm confident that is going to become Aaron Rodgers' best friend very, very quickly at the tight end position. Yeah, you still got Jimmy Graham. I think it wouldn't shock me. And if year one, this guy's neck and neck with Jimmy Graham in terms of catches, and let Jimmy go down for a 4-week stretch with an injury, Sternberger will have more catches than him in his rookie season if he's able to stay healthy. I feel that confident about what this guy brings to the table. I'm really high on Jace Sternberger. No, he's not a blocker at all whatsoever. You're going to have to find somebody else to do that. You can coach him up a little bit, maybe get him to be formidable enough to the point where you don't have to pull him off the field in obvious rundowns and have him be able to be on the field so you're not giving away that it's a pass when he's on the field. But to hell with all of that. If you're just talking about a guy that can be a mismatch nightmare, a guy that can get out there and make plays for you at the tight end position, something you've really lacked in Green Bay for quite some time. Again, Jimmy Graham gave you a little something last year, but this guy can give you more. I'm sure of it. And so I'm bullish on this pick. I thought that this was tremendous value here in the third round. To me, he was one of the best tight end prospects in what was a deep tight end group. I was really fond of this tight end group. I was really, really high on this crop of tight ends. And you got yourself one of the better ones in this group here in the third round. Let's take tight end off the board as you got an elite pass catching tight end in this draft. Straight up. No other way to say it. You got one of the best pass catching tight ends in all of the 2019 NFL draft here in the third round. 75th pick overall. Tight end out of Texas A&M. Jace Sternberger for me is...
Hits one high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
Home run. Now we go to the fifth round, 150th pick overall. And quickly, for those of you who haven't watched my video on Jace Sternberger, and remember, that comes equipped with film study as well. I comped him to a guy that came out of the draft last year, selected by the Philadelphia Eagles in the second round. They traded up to get him so that the Cowboys wouldn't. In Dallas Goedert, a guy that is extremely talented as a pass catcher, wasn't much of a blocker, but you saw on tape a guy that was willing to block, and I thought he actually did a really admirable job in his rookie season of blocking. And so the hopes are that he comes in, takes the coaching, and is able to make himself into a serviceable blocker. But the guy's going to catch the football. He's going to catch 50, 60 balls. It wouldn't shock me if he had 40 to 50 balls caught in his rookie season, and that number grows to 65, 70 in year two if healthy. That's how talented and how high I think of, or how highly I think of Jace Sternberger. But we go to the fifth round, 150th pick overall. Defensive lineman out of Texas A&M, Kingsley Keke. Keke, are you with me in this fourth or the fifth round for the Green Bay Packers? So, Kingsley Keke out of Texas A&M, 6'3", 288 pounds. This was a guy that used to be up around 310 pounds and dropped some weight to be a more effective defensive lineman, kick outside the defensive end for Texas A&M. He was a nose tackle initially, dropped the weight, got into much better shape, and then all of a sudden, this guy could rush the quarterback. And so I remember I talked about the Packers having a ton of guys that could stop the run, Dean Lowry and all of those guys up front, Daniels, and all of the depth that you have along the defensive line. Obviously, the UCLA product has been really good for you as well. And so there's so much talent, that you have along the defensive line. And you're adding to that in a guy that I think can actually get to the quarterback. Kenny Clark is solid in that regard, but I think he's a guy that, along with Daniels and all those guys, Dean Lowry, all those other guys that I've liked over the years for Green Bay, can stop the run. This guy can stop the run and affect the quarterback. I think he's more efficient at getting to the quarterback than he is stopping the run, if you want me to be brutally honest with you. Let's take defensive line off of the needs, that the Packers just are knocking down these needs one by one in this draft. So let's get to Kingsley Keke and what he brings to the table. 4'9", 540. So you're talking about a guy that's right around 290 pounds, running a sub 540. Kingsley Keke has shown the versatility to play multiple positions on the D-line. Originally a 310-pound defensive tackle, Keke shed 20 pounds to become a 290-pound defensive end for the Aggies. As some may wonder what Keke's best fit will be at the next level, look, I see him as a one-gap penetrating defensive lineman that can wreak havoc and cause problems in the backfield. His quickness and array of moves, including a spin move that is lethal when executed properly. And I saw him execute this spin move beautifully several times on tape, so I know that he has a firm grasp of when to pull it out to help him pressure the quarterback. While he can be more impactful versus the run, I don't think he's as impactful. It doesn't shed blocks as effectively as I would like him to. He can definitely add value to any defensive line starving for versatility and athleticism. And so I see him as a guy that initially, if he makes this football team, which I don't doubt that that's going to take place. Again, when you get a new general manager that comes in, wants to put his thumbprint on a team, a lot of his draft picks make the team because he's trying to flush out some of the players that were drafted by the last regime, and he's trying to get more of his guys that he's identified as players that he and his scouting staff loves onto the roster. So the thing that's unique with the Packers is that a lot of these guys are in-house. So he was a part of the process that brought a lot of these players that are here. He was a part of that process. So not to say that this is a brand new staff and a lot of those players he doesn't love, but as a general manager, things change when you're in that seat. You want more of your guys helping you potentially keep your job or lose your job. You want to go down with your guys at the end of the day. And so I can see a guy like Kingsley Keke making this football team. And there is a niche he can carve out for himself as a guy that can get to the quarterback from the defensive line. Now, I don't think he's a strong run stuffer at this point, but you've got guys to do that. What you don't have is a number of guys and enough guys to get to the quarterback. And so that's why I think he can carve out a niche for himself. I look at him, and my comp for him is a guy that was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers a few years ago out of App State in Ronald Blair, a guy that was right around 280, 85 pounds, similar to Kingsley Keke, was explosive off the snap, could get to the quarterback, had an array of moves, and I thought that he was going to come in and be a guy that could wreak havoc from the interior of the defensive line, and I see the same kind of traits in Kingsley Keke, and so it'll be interesting to see how he's used if he does in fact make this roster, and it's a part of the rotation up front. Again, if you're running multiple fronts, you need a bunch of defensive linemen, and this is a guy that could easily crack the Packers 53-man roster. We'll see what happens. You know, he could easily be a guy that makes their practice squad, and they stash him away and work with him, and then, you know, down the line he's on this Packers roster. We'll see, but I think this guy's a solid selection here in the 5th round for the Green Bay Packers, and I really expect him to make your football team here in the 5th round, 150th pick overall, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M, back-to-back Aggie selected in this draft for the Packers. Keke, are you with me? Here in the 5th round, Kingsley Keke for me is... So we go to the 6th round now, 185th pick overall. Defensive back out of Toledo, Kadar Hollman is the pick. So Kadar Hollman is an intriguing prospect here. And these are the kind of guys that I always advocate taking in the later rounds. Height, weight, speed specimens, guys that test well and athletically are off the charts, guys with checkered past that have issues off the field but no mistaking their talents, or guys that have a very, very bad injury history leading up to the draft, but guys talented. If he can stay healthy, you could get yourself a late draft, late round gem. So, you know, all of those guys to me are on the table once you get to the 6th and 7th rounds. I don't like taking those guys 5th round or earlier, but once you get in the 6th and the 7th round, I'm all for the guys with some kind of red flag, whether it be medical, off the field with behavior issues, or guys that are switching positions, but they're still extremely raw because they haven't had a lot of experience. Small school guys testing off the charts. all of those guys, injury histories, all of that stuff. I'm looking for those guys in the 6th and 7th round. This guy fits that profile to a T here in the 6th round, 6 feet, buck 96. He tested ridiculously well at Toledo's pro day. 4.3740 for Kadar Hollman with a 39-inch vert. Both of those would have been among the best at the combine at the cornerback position. So you're talking about a guy that is stupid athletic. And you don't necessarily see it all the time on tape, but it's there, okay? You can't coach that kind of stuff. And so off the charts athleticism and solid measurables make Kadar Hollman an intriguing selection in the later rounds. From a relative unknown with no scholarship offers to a walk-on turned NFL draft pick, Hollman has a long way to go to turn that athleticism into top-notch play. Lots of off coverage at Toledo, a ton of cover 4, which that's not foreign to most teams in college football. That's what you see a lot of times in college football is a ton of cover 4. But what I can tell you is I went and sought out his best game. I watched him in 3 games, but I wanted to see him playing well. So I went to find the game where he had the most plays made and he had the most pass breakups versus Buffalo. So I went and watched him in that game and I saw what he was capable of. And he's aggressive at the point of catch. Let me continue on with my diagnosis of him. But the tools are there and he's aggressive at the point of catch and a willing tackler. And so this is a guy that plays with a chip on his shoulder. At the point of catch, he's very aggressive. There are times where he does not locate the football, which is a pet peeve of mine, but he's still raking at the arm, raking at the ball, extremely aggressive at point of catch. Watched him against a future draft pick in this year's draft, Keyshawn Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, was selected by the Arizona Cardinals up against Fresno State. And he was holding his own in that game. Gave up some catches, but he was right there a number of times. He's always right there. Doesn't always make the play, which is, again, some of that is him not locating the ball. Some of it is just he's not instinctual enough at this point. But again, with some time and some energy spent and invested in a guy like Kadar Hollman, you could have something down the road. I do not think he's ready to help you on the field at the cornerback position necessarily. But special teams wise, you're not going to find many guys running a sub 4.4. So you put him on the field as a gunner initially. He helps you on specials. You continue to work with this guy. And eventually you hope that he can find the field and produce as a cornerback for you. But these are the kind of guys you take in the later rounds, man. This is an intriguing prospect here in the 6th round, 185th pick overall. A defensive back out of Toledo, Kadar Hollman, for me, is remember I told you that a lot of these comps are going to remind you of Packers of old and guys that you may not have fond memories of. Here's a guy that you probably don't. My comp for him is Ahmad Carroll. Okay, Ahmad Carroll, if you remember, out of Arkansas, 1st round pick of the Green Bay Packers, did not work in Green Bay. Hell, didn't work in the NFL at all. Had all the speed and athleticism you could ask for in one body, but just simply wasn't a very good corner. I don't know if that's going to be the end-all, be-all for Kadar Hollman. I don't know if that's going to be his story in the league. All right, I just know he's got all the athleticism one can ask for in one cornerback body. All right, now it's his job to take that athleticism and turn it into production on the field, something Ahmad Carroll wasn't able to do. And so I see a lot of what I saw in Ahmad Carroll. I remember watching him coming out of Arkansas. I see a lot of those same traits here. And I want to see more from Kadar Hollman. And again, some of it not his fault. He didn't play a lot of press, a lot of man-to-man. They didn't ask him to at Toledo. All right? I want to see what this guy is really made of because he's got a ton of athleticism. Not a lot of ball production. Not a lot of pass breakups. Not what you would expect from that kind of athleticism. So, again, not all of it his fault, but I'm looking forward to seeing what this guy can potentially do. Got to make the roster first, and I think his best way to do that initially is going to be through special teams. As we continue on in the 6th round, 194th pick overall, running back out of Notre Dame, Dexter Williams is the pick. So, I really like this pick. Him being a former Golden Domer, me being a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, the two things just work very well. And so I can tell you all about Dexter Williams. 5'11", 212, ran a 4.57, which was somewhat disappointing. I thought he would run faster than that. Ran a 4.59 at his pro day, so he did not clean it up. So he's a 4.5, 4.55 guy or so. And that's okay because of the way that he runs the football. But a talented back that surprisingly didn't test all that well and coupled with some potential off-the-field maturity issues, probably saw his stock drop. But let me give you the skinny on Dexter Williams. This is a guy that had his issues at Notre Dame, as I just mentioned. A guy that got caught with weed, which, okay, it's weed. It's not like this guy was, but and then there was a gun in the car, but one of the other players ended up fessing up saying, no, that's my gun. And so this is a guy that was suspended for the first 4 games of the season last year for Notre Dame. But when he finally got his opportunity, after missing the first month of the season, this guy came on like gangbusters, man. He was arguably our best player on offense. The guy is very versatile, although he didn't catch it well at his pro day. Again, very surprising because he caught it well at Notre Dame for us. All right, he was versatile out of the backfield. He's a patient runner that uses a combination of patience and burst to take advantage of holes and cutbacks. The Virginia Tech game stands out. Had a 98-yard run, if I'm not mistaken, 97-yard run in that game, 97 yards. Beautiful run there, big hole, but he set it up and then took off and they couldn't catch him from behind, which is why I thought and a guy tried to hawk him, but he couldn't get him. And I thought that looks like 4.5, 4.49 speed. I didn't expect closer to 4.6. So you watched him against Clemson. When Clemson dominated us, the one guy on the field that looked like he belonged, that could actually play and hold a candle to Clemson was Dexter Williams. He was the only guy on the field that looked like he wasn't scared. And so this is a guy that is so talented, all right? So talented. Sets up blocks well, cuts off blocks well, gets small and skinny in holes. He gets what's there and then some. Doesn't leave a lot of meat on the bone. As a matter of fact, you want to hear something funny? My comp is the guy that made that leaving meat on the bone comment in Dallas once upon a time. And don't forget how talented of a runner coming into the league Joseph Randall was out of Oklahoma State. I remember Joseph Randall getting an opportunity in Dallas and me thinking he's going to be the next guy to get an opportunity to be a stud in Dallas at the running back position. It was only a matter of time. He was a backup when he first got into the league. He was buying his time, and eventually he was going to get an opportunity, and he was playing well. His problem was he couldn't stay couldn't stay out of trouble off the field. There's talent here to me with Dexter Williams, a guy that I think can be a very talented runner. And I think he offers you something that I can't say you don't have, because I thought he was going to run faster. I really did. And maybe he plays faster than what he was timed at. Maybe he doesn't test well. But, Aaron Jones and Williams aren't burners. Dexter Williams doesn't seem like he's a burner. But I think he'll fit as a good number 2 back on this roster. I think he will jump over Williams when it's all said and done. I think that Aaron Jones is still the lead dog, but Aaron Jones he's not averse to getting injured and missing 3 weeks of action. I could easily see Dexter Williams assuming the number 2 back role on this roster before it's all said and done. Before his rookie season is done, I could see him being the second guy that Matt LaFleur is turning to on this team when they're spelling Aaron Jones. And by season's end, they're splitting the workload in the backfield. Dexter Williams, this is great value in the second round. The only thing that I question with him is obviously some of the off-the-field maturity. If not for that, then this would be a higher score for me. But I know that this guy comes with a little bit of baggage off the field. I know that this guy didn't test well. And so I'm taking all of those things into account when I give him the score that I give him. I was itching to up this thing, but I'm going to have better judgment here. And I know that this guy has some things he has to iron out, but the talent is definitely there. Let's take running back off your needs list as Dexter Williams completes all of the needs that I have for the Packers going into the draft. And I say this is a phenomenal pick here in the 6th round, 94th pick overall. running back out of Notre Dame, Dexter Williams, for me is. And so we wrap up this Packers draft in the 7th round, 226th pick overall. Linebacker out of TCU, Ty Summers is the selection. Now, truly, this is a linebacker pick. I gave you the linebacker distinction earlier when you selected Rashan Gary in the 1st round. But this is where you should probably be taking linebacker more specifically off the board of needs, because Rashan Gary is more of an edge rusher and not an inside linebacker. Okay, you need help at inside linebacker. You need more depth beside Oren Burks and Blake Martinez, who, if I'm not mistaken, is going into the last year of his deal, I think. He may have 2 years left. But I know he's getting close. And so you just need more depth at inside, especially with Jake Ryan, who was out all of 2018 with an ACL. But you still need more depth at linebacker. And I actually like this guy here, Ty Summers, in the 7th round. Now, there are some deficiencies, which is why he's here in the 7th round. But they aren't deficiencies that can't be overcome. It's not like this guy is a sluggish athlete or this guy is lacking in size or something that he can't help. These are things that I think he can clean up and get better at and potentially see the field sooner rather than later. I actually was impressed with this tape. You know, I read some of the reports of what people were complaining about with his game, and I'm like, while I hear you, these aren't complaints that would keep me away from drafting this guy in the 6th round. Hell, even in the 5th round, if you would have told me Ty Summers was the 5th round pick, for some of the backers that I saw drafted in this draft, in the 4th, in the 5th, I saw teams reach like Detroit in the 2nd round for linebackers. This guy seems like he's on par with some of those backers that were taken earlier in the draft. I'm not saying, and this is a weak linebacker draft, I'm just saying. So, anyway, Ty Summers, 6'1", 241. So right there, really good size. Really good. That's right in the middle of today's NFL linebacker. He's not big and burly at 250, where he can't move and got to take him off the field on 3rd downs. But he's not too light in that 230 range with the guys that we see coming into the league that are uber athletic and fast, but maybe can't hold up in the run game. He's right in that sweet spot at 240, 6'1", 240. That's good NFL linebacker size. And he ran a 4.51 with a 36-inch vert, so he's athletically gifted. And I saw that on tape. I heard people complaining, you don't see the tape match up with the athleticism. Bullshit. I saw a guy that was running. I saw a guy that the first play I saw him get in a hole and stuff a running back. It's about the 3rd play I watched him on the first game I put on. And this guy's running out to the sidelines making a tackle, and I'm like, shit, that was impressive. Then I saw him run out on a swing route to the running back out of the backfield and make a tackle. And I'm like, shit, that was impressive. And then I continued to watch. And as I watched more and more, I saw a guy that I said, hey, look, man, there's some stuff to work with here. I'm watching this dude carry slot receivers 30 yards down the field, step for step, right in the hip pocket, right in phase. And I'm like, I can work with this stuff, man. Let me give you Ty Summers quickly. An athletic linebacker that flashes some ability, but injuries and tentativeness have stunted his growth as a player. However, his size and speed make him a player with late round value. I see potential in Summers, and he runs well in coverage, but lots of missed tackles and hesitation don't do his athleticism justice. So here's a guy that I saw miss a bunch of tackles. That was my biggest complaint with him, was sometimes he could shoot his gun, but I say that about a lot of linebackers, and I don't know how they're being coached. So while I want to kill him for hesitating and allowing a center or a guard to climb to the 2nd level and get to him, I don't know what he's being coached to do. I don't know if a coach is telling him, hey, make sure it's not play action before you react and come up. And so maybe that's embedded in his head, and he don't want to overreact to run action and step up and leave a void in the zone that he's supposed to be covering and dropping into. And so he's hesitant to come up, and that allows that offensive lineman to climb to the 2nd level, come off that double team and get to him. I'm not going to beat him up for that. What I am going to beat him up for, though, what is within his control and within his power, is making tackles. He misses too many tackles for me. He comes up all wild and out of control. Guys stop on a dime or cut back and he goes flying by or he misses. Too many arm tackles that he's not able to corral a guy and get him down. But I saw a number of tackles where he was able to make guys, was able to get guys on the ground and was able to make that tackle despite flying up at a very high rate of speed. So there's a lot. I said all that to say this. I like Ty Summers in the 7th round, man. I do. I really think this is a guy that can make your football team. And for a team that's somewhat lacking in depth at linebacker, I think this is a guy that, for starters, helps you on special teams right away. I think with that kind of speed, you cannot ignore his size. I think he helps you on special teams right away. Then after you get past that, I think that this is a guy that you coach up, you work with, and I see this guy. I can't tell you how many times this guy was in the slot playing over a tight end or a receiver, and it's almost like he watched film and was a rat in the film room because he's shading guys to the outside, and they're running an outbreaking route and he's all over. You know, I'm like, did you not know that there was the capability of that guy running an in-breaking route here? And he's like, nope, seen it on tape from this formation and that set. They don't run in-breaking routes. This slot guy runs out-breaking routes. So I'm going to shade him to the outside, and I'm going to go and take it away. And he did a bunch of times. So I like Ty Summers, man. I really do here in the 7th round. 226 pick overall, linebacker out of TCU. Ty Summers, for me, is... And as a comp for him, ex-Packer Jake Ryan is what I see. So if you were a fan of Jake Ryan's, I think you got another guy that could fill in similar size, similar athleticism, similar ability to make plays. If you like Jake Ryan, this is a guy that fits right into what Green Bay does defensively. But now, what the Packers did defensively has changed. You got a new defensive coordinator in Mike Pettin, and so things are going to change drastically. But I like Ty Summers, man. I like him. I like him a lot. And so that's the Green Bay Packers, man. Brian G, man. I'm going to tell you what. This is a really good draft. I like this draft much better than his first draft last season, which I wasn't blown away by. A bunch of receivers, bunch of corners. This draft, to me, has way more substance. Less picks, not 11 like it was last year. Only 8 this year. But to me, far more substance. More guys that deserve a spot on the roster if their potential that I saw meets the talent, or the talent that I saw meets the potential for this Packers roster. I could see some guys really having an impact right away, like Jace Sternberger, like Darnell Savage Jr. The jury's. I'm not a huge Rashan Gary guy, but he's talented nonetheless. You know. Elgton Jenkins is going to come in and he's going to play somewhere and he's going to help right away. I mean, that's 4 guys that could probably contribute day one for this Packers football team. Not to mention some of the guys you got later in the draft, like a Keke that could help along the defensive line. I think Dexter Williams is a guy that's going to get touches in his rookie season. And then I just told you, I like Ty Summers, man. I really do. So this is a really nice draft for the Green Bay Packers. Let's take a look at what they were able to score. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up of the Green Bay Packers. Remember, if you haven't already done so, what are you waiting on? Subscribe to the Louie Tee Network for more great content on the Packers and every other team in the National Football League. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing when it comes to the National Football League here on the Louie Tee Network. Also, remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. That extends to the Louie Tee Network podcast. That's available on Stitcher, on Google Music Play, on Apple Podcasts, on TuneIn, and on Spotify, as well as the website LouieTNetwork.net. So make sure you check out the Louie Tee Network podcast as well. I'm your man Louie T, signing off. Until next time, you guys out there have a good one.
Louie Tee Network.